There's a moment, quiet, unassuming, where everything feels familiar. Not comforting familiar, but déjà vu familiar. Like a conversation you've had 100 times with different faces. Like waking up in the same morning with a different date. You look around your life and realize it's moving, but not forward. The people may change, the scenery might update, but the emotion, the frequency, still the same. You feel the loop, and yet you keep pressing play. We don't do it because we're broken. We do it because we're programmed. Somewhere deep in the soft tissues of our subconscious, a story has been running. A story written not with words, but with energy, with emotional echoes from our childhood, with survival codes etched into our nervous system. A loop, yes, but not a punishment. A mirror, reflecting back the frequency we forgot we were still carrying. This is the part they don't teach us when we try to manifest. That reality doesn't follow desire, it follows embodiment. That the universe doesn't respond to what you think you want, but what your body has memorized as safe. If chaos felt like home, you'll keep walking into rooms that shake. If rejection felt familiar, you'll keep pulling the same silence from different mouths. It's not your fault, but it is your field. And when the field keeps playing the same song, the world just dances to it, again and again. Until one day, you stop dancing, you pause, you breathe. You feel the tightness in your chest, and instead of pushing through it, you get curious. You soften. You sit with it like an old friend, and suddenly, something begins to tremble inside you. Not fear, not shame, but the beginning of choice. The sacred crack in the pattern. See, the loop is not sustained by life. It's sustained by attention. Wherever you keep placing your awareness, energy flows. And where energy flows, identity solidifies. So if your awareness has been fused with the old story, if your mind keeps scanning the horizon for evidence of the past, you are not just living the loop, you are feeding it. But what happens when you become the observer, not the actor? When you stop identifying with the thought and start witnessing it like a cloud passing across your sky? The loop starts to lose its grip, not because you forced it, but because you changed your signal. You can't fake frequency. You can't pretend your way into a new life while holding the same cellular tension. But when you regulate your nervous system, when you bring safety to your own breath, something opens. A new timeline becomes available, not because the external world rearranged, but because your internal signal did. You changed the station, and the loop can't find you on a different frequency. That's why it feels like a cycle, not because life is cruel, but because your subconscious is loyal. It will keep returning to what it knows, until you reteach it what is safe to allow. That's the real work, not vision boards, not affirmations shouted over anxiety. The real work is the moment you choose to feel something new and let it land. In your breath, in your bones, in your being. And sometimes, all it takes is 1 second of presence. One deep, surrendered exhale where you stop reaching and start receiving. In that second, you're not in the loop anymore. You're the one watching it. And the watcher is always free. It's strange, isn't it? How freedom doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like stillness, like the moment your shoulders drop without you realizing it, like the first breath after a long-held brace. It's not dramatic, it's cellular, and that's why we miss it. We keep looking for transformation in the loud places, the big leaps, the explosive awakenings, but real shift hums in the background, quiet, like truth, because the loop doesn't break with effort. It dissolves with coherence. When your heart and your brain stop arguing, when your body stops pretending to be fine and actually feels safe, that's when new choices become visible. That's when possibility shows its face, not as a fantasy, but as a frequency. One you can actually hold, and holding it is everything, not for a moment, for long enough that your field starts to trust it, long enough that your cells start translating it into chemistry, into posture, into presence. That's embodiment, not the idea of a new reality, but the signal of it. Felt, breathed, lived. But that's also why the loop is seductive, because it doesn't require presence, only repetition. You don't have to be awake to stay in the loop. You just have to be familiar, comfortable in the discomfort, alert, but disconnected, surviving, but not alive. And we get used to it. We build stories to justify it. That's just how people are. Nothing ever works out for me. This is just who I am. We don't even hear the loop anymore. It becomes the background music of our lives. But just because it's quiet doesn't mean it's harmless. Familiarity is not the same as alignment. And the more you identify with the old signal, the more you'll reject anything that doesn't match it, even if it's what you've been praying for. That's the paradox of healing. Sometimes it feels worse before it feels better, because when you stop feeding the loop, it protests. It tempts you with old comforts. It whispers old fears. It begs you to come back to what it knows. But that resistance isn't a sign to stop. It's a sign you're close. The program is trying to survive, but your essence is waking up. And this is where choice becomes sacred. Not a mental decision, but an energetic stand. You get to say, I no longer vibrate at the frequency of that story. Not with force, but with frequency. Not from defense, from embodiment. You become the field where the old narrative can't survive. Because it's not being fed. Not with your attention. Not with your nervous system. Not with your identity. And when the loop no longer finds resonance, it stops repeating. Not because you fought it, but because you became someone else. Not overnight, not all at once, but breath by breath, signal by signal. You remembered what safety feels like, and your reality restructured to match it. Because reality is not fixed. It's fractal. It reflects you, not the surface you, the signal you, the frequency beneath the words, the emotions beneath the habits, the safety beneath the dreams. And when that signal changes, the loop unravels, not with a bang, but with a breath. Sometimes it's not about changing everything. It's about noticing one small moment where you usually abandon yourself and choosing not to. One tiny fork in the day where you'd usually rush, numb, scroll, tighten, and instead, you pause, you soften, you notice. And in that micro choice, you alter your signal. You interrupt the broadcast. You send a new message into the field. It's these seemingly insignificant moments that carry the weight of new timelines. Because reality doesn't shift with declarations. It shifts with embodiment. The loop isn't broken by what you say you want. It's broken by what you stop rehearsing. Because each loop begins in sensation, not in thought. It begins the moment your body registers a familiar cue, someone's tone, a glance, a delay in response, and it leaps into its old choreography. Tight chest, short breath, contracted presence. You think you're reacting to now, but really, you're reliving a yesterday dressed in today's clothes. So what happens when you notice that? When you don't just override the signal, but actually meet it? Gently, curiously. You place your hand over your heart, take a breath and say, I see you. That part of you that wants to armor up. That part that's afraid this moment will become a past wound replayed. And instead of spiraling into the story, you stay. You stay with you. And in that staying, something unlocks. Not intellectually, energetically. You're not abandoning yourself. You're creating safety in real time. And safety is the portal. Because only in safety can new identity emerge. Not survival identity, the mask, the pleaser, the fixer, but essence. The real you beneath the programming. And essence doesn't force. It remembers. It harmonizes. It vibrates clarity. When you rest in essence, you don't chase alignment. It finds you. Because alignment is a frequency match, not a checklist. It's not about doing all the right things. It's about becoming the resonance where right things flow. But we forget. We confuse familiarity with alignment. We call the old loop normal and the new frequency uncomfortable. Not because it's wrong, but because it's unknown. And the subconscious doesn't crave joy. It craves certainty. Even if that certainty hurts. Even if it means choosing pain over peace. Just because it feels predictable. That's where compassion comes in. Not just for others, for yourself. Because breaking the loop means grieving the part of you that thought it needed the loop to survive. It means letting go of the identity that was built around protecting you. It means looking at your own fear and saying, thank you, you kept me safe. But we're safe now, we can evolve. And that's when the loop loses its power. Not because it disappears, but because it's no longer you. You can witness it, but you don't collapse into it. You can feel it rise, and still choose presence. You can see the program, and still choose coherence. That's mastery. Not in perfection, in repetition, in returning to truth again and again until it becomes your new home. Because you're not stuck, you're rehearsed. And the moment you stop rehearsing the old identity, the moment you interrupt the pattern with presence, you're no longer in the loop. You're watching it from the edge. And from that edge, anything is possible. There's a kind of magic that lives in that edge, the edge between the known and the true, the moment right before you react the same way you always do. And instead, you breathe, you witness, you choose differently. Not because it's easy, because it's aligned, because it's time. And in that sacred pause, your entire future shifts. Not visibly, maybe not yet, but energetically. And energy always leads. This is the unseen architecture of manifestation. Not desire projected outward, but coherence built inward. When your inner field stabilizes, reality has no choice but to mirror it. It's not wishful thinking, it's quantum response, the observer effect in motion. When you observe with a new frequency, the observed begins to change. The loop only persists when you're vibrating at its level. Once you rise, it can't find you. And rising isn't about becoming more. It's about becoming less entangled, less loyal to the old identity, less identified with the wound. It's about releasing the version of you that learned to survive by looping. Because when you stop performing for safety and start being in safety, you begin to radiate a different kind of power. Quiet, unshakable, magnetic. This is where things begin to collapse. Not destructively, but organically. What's no longer in resonance begins to fade. People, patterns, even parts of you that once felt essential start to fall away. And though it may look like loss, it's actually alignment, the shedding of distortion, the clearing of space, for what's real, for what's already waiting in the field, vibrating in coherence, ready to meet you as you meet yourself. It doesn't happen through striving. It happens through allowing, through softening the grip, through becoming the frequency of what you say you want before it shows up. That's the paradox. You have to become it to see it. And that doesn't mean pretending. It means embodying. It means living like you're already safe, already worthy, already whole, because that's what you truly are. And the loop can't survive in that truth. You'll feel the pull, of course, the temptation to check the old narrative, to replay the old fear, to make sure the past isn't creeping back in. But every time you look for evidence of the old story, you feed it. Every time you choose to anchor into presence instead, you starve it. The loop is only as strong as your attachment to it. And what if, just for today, you gave yourself permission to not believe the familiar story? What if you leaned into the unknown, not with fear, but with reverence? What if the unknown isn't empty? It's fertile, waiting for you to land, not with control, but with trust. Not by proving, but by receiving. You don't escape the loop by running. You escape it by no longer matching it. You become the place where the pattern ends, where it unravels in the face of your coherence, your grounded nervous system, your regulated breath, your steady, surrendered presence. This is not just personal, it's vibrational. When you break the loop within yourself, you break it for your lineage, for your children, for everyone who was taught that safety must be earned, that love must be proven, that worth must be achieved. You become the field where none of that is true anymore. And that's the kind of power that doesn't scream. It radiates. It transforms without trying. It shifts timelines by simply existing. That's you. When you stop pressing play, when you start living as the signal of something new. The world doesn't need more effort. It needs more coherence. More people walking around as living signals of peace, not pretending, not performing, just being, regulated, embodied, real. Because embodiment isn't about perfection. It's about consistency. It's about coming back again and again to your own center, to your own knowing, even when the loop tries to seduce you back into reaction. And it will, because the loop is persistent. It thrives on automation. It wants you to forget you have a choice. It whispers, "See, nothing's changing." It plays on your impatience. It feeds off your need for proof. But here's the secret. The moment you demand external confirmation is the moment you slip back into the loop. Because the loop is built on needing the outside to validate the inside. True transformation flips that script. You stabilize the inside first, and the outside follows. but not always instantly, not always on your timeline. Because the universe doesn't respond to urgency, it responds to frequency. And frequency requires surrender, not passivity, deep trust, an anchored, regulated nervous system that can hold the gap between the old and the new without collapsing, without scrambling to fix, without shrinking to fit. That's the gap most people run from, the in-between, the space where nothing looks different yet, but everything is vibrating differently beneath the surface. That's where the miracle brews, but it's also where the loop tries to pull you back. Because it knows, if you can hold through this part, you're free. You're no longer running the old script. You're broadcasting a new one, and that changes everything. It's in this space that identity begins to rewire. You're no longer the person waiting for a shift. You're the person being the shift, not as a concept, as a frequency, as a way of breathing, walking, speaking, choosing. You're becoming the signal your future recognizes, and reality starts to respond, not with fireworks but with reflections, soft, subtle confirmations, a conversation that feels different, a moment of ease where there used to be tension, a synchronicity that makes you pause. That's how you know. The field is moving. You're becoming unloopable, because what you embody, you attract. What you consistently signal, you stabilize. And what you stabilize becomes structure. It becomes the new baseline of your reality. That's how timelines collapse, not by force, but by frequency. You're no longer playing out the same scenario with new faces. You're not reacting from the old wound. You're not bracing for pain that hasn't arrived. You're just here, whole, unshaken. And in that wholeness, you create space for beauty, for connection, for the life that's been circling your field, waiting for you to become the version of you who can receive it. Not just want it, hold it, sustain it, embody it. You're not manifesting from lack. You're remembering from truth. You're becoming a lighthouse in your own storm, a transmitter of new possibility. And the loop, it can't find you here, because you're not the same frequency anymore. You're not pressing play on that old script. You're composing something new, breath by breath, choice by choice, signal by signal. And now you begin to notice the subtle reorienting of life. Not dramatic, not chaotic, just clear. The static begins to clear from the signal. You don't react as quickly. You don't spiral as deeply. You catch the loop mid-sentence and whisper, "Not this time." That's how the old reality dissolves. Not with grand declarations, but with quiet refusal. With energetic boundaries so firm, they don't need words. Because when you stop participating in the loop, you stop perpetuating it. And that's when time bends. Days feel different. Opportunities arrive not as chance, but as matches. You see things that were always there but hidden behind the fog of your own frequency. It's not that the world changes first. It's that you begin to see it through coherence, not distortion. This is where manifestation matures. No longer a game of getting, but a practice of becoming. You don't chase desires like a carrot on a string. You become the soil in which those desires naturally bloom, not by controlling the outcome, but by cultivating the signal, the inner atmosphere, the energetic climate of your being. It's like tuning an instrument. When you're in tune, the song plays through you with ease. You don't have to force the melody. It's already encoded in your coherence. You don't have to micromanage life. You just have to stay in tune. Regulated, embodied, present. That's the new loop. The one worth pressing play on. The one that doesn't cage you. It frees you. But freedom isn't always comfortable. Sometimes it feels like standing on the edge of who you used to be, staring into the vast openness of who you're becoming. No map, no guarantees. Just you, and breath, and the soft hum of a new timeline inviting you forward. And your nervous system might shake. That's okay. Safety isn't the absence of fear. It's the ability to hold it, breathe through it, and still choose truth. Because fear will come. The loop will whisper. But now, you're not listening from the same place. You're grounded. You're watching. And in that watching, you reclaim power. The power to stay in your body, to stay with your signal, to stay with what you know, even if it hasn't arrived yet. And when the mind demands evidence, you remind it gently. The field rearranges according to coherence, not urgency. You're not waiting. You're preparing. You're harmonizing with what's already true in the quantum. You're living in resonance with the version of you who already holds the life you desire. And that's the most powerful signal there is. Not more effort, more remembering, not more control, more coherence, not more action, more alignment. This is where loops end, in the soft, steady rhythm of someone who's no longer performing life, but living it from essence. Because you're not here to chase timelines, you're here to collapse them, by becoming the version of you that no longer fits inside the old script. And when you do, the script has no choice but to rewrite itself around your new frequency. The loop was never stronger than you. It just needed your participation. And now that you've stepped out, you've become the author. And as the author, you realize you were never stuck, only rehearsed, practicing a role written before you even knew you were reading a script, carrying emotions that weren't fully yours, reacting to cues from a past you never questioned. And now you question everything. Not with doubt, with devotion. Devotion to truth, to presence, to the signal underneath the surface. You begin to live from sensation, not assumption. You check in with your breath before you check your phone. You notice the micro-tightening in your shoulders and ask it what it needs. You feel the shift in your chest when something aligns, and you follow that. Not logic, not habit, but inner resonance. You're building a relationship with your field, with your body, with your frequency, and it's the most honest relationship you've ever had. Because this is what alignment sounds like. Quiet, steady, uncompromising. Not loud, not grand, just deeply true. And truth doesn't scream. It hums. It pulls you in like a magnet. It guides you like a current. It becomes the compass that never fails, once you learn to trust it. And trust isn't built in the moment of breakthrough. It's built in the quiet repetitions, the tiny, unglamorous choices. When you sit with yourself instead of seeking distraction, when you soften instead of harden, when you stay instead of escape. Every time you choose coherence over chaos, presence over performance, you build trust. With your body, with the field, with life itself. And that trust, it becomes your safety. Not the false safety of predictability, but the true safety of self-connection. You stop outsourcing your peace to circumstances. You stop needing the external to match before you feel okay. You become okay first, and the external begins to match you. Not out of obedience, out of resonance. You begin to witness life reorganizing around your embodiment. People speak to you differently. Doors open. Challenges feel less like attacks and more like invitations. You don't fear contrast. You use it as a tuning fork, as a mirror, as a reminder of the signal you've chosen to live from. And when you slip, and you will, you don't shame yourself. You return, gently, powerfully, again and again. Because coherence isn't perfection, it's return. Alignment isn't constant, it's chosen. In every moment, in every breath, you get to remember who you are. Not the version shaped by trauma, but the one anchored in truth. The one that was always there, beneath the noise, waiting to be felt. And in that remembering, you create a new rhythm, a new loop, one of safety, of presence, of power. Not the power that dominates, the power that magnetizes, the power that hums in your cells when you're no longer hiding from yourself. This is where life starts to feel like flow again. Not because everything is easy, but because everything is honest, aligned, alive. You're no longer pressing play on the old story. You're composing a new one, in real time. One breath, one signal, one moment at a time. And now, the loop is no longer your prison. It's your teacher. You see it not as a trap, but as a reflection. A beautiful, relentless mirror showing you where your frequency still echoes the past. You no longer fight it. You study it. You thank it. You let it dissolve in the warmth of your awareness. Because when you stop resisting the lesson, the loop loses its purpose. It was never here to punish you. It was here to awaken you. And awaken you have. Now every trigger becomes a tuning fork. Every familiar emotion a chance to deepen your signal. Every moment of discomfort, a whisper from your nervous system asking for your presence, not your panic. And you meet it, fully. Because you've learned. The body doesn't betray, it communicates. And your reality? It's just translating your signal into structure. So you live differently now. You breathe slower. You listen deeper. You choose with care, not from fear. You ask yourself, what is my field broadcasting right now? And you calibrate, not by forcing, but by feeling. By returning to the frequency of truth, not as an idea, as a sensation, in your gut, in your spine, in your chest. Because that's where reality begins, not in thought, but in vibration. And now, you don't just know that, you feel it. You're living it. You're no longer reacting, you're creating. Not from effort, from essence, from the still sovereign core of you that remembers, I am not the loop. I am the signal that commands what plays. And that command? It's not loud. It's not desperate. It's soft, clear, anchored. You don't plead with the universe, you partner with it. You don't hustle for alignment, you harmonize with it. You become so energetically trustworthy, the field has no choice but to meet you. Because coherence is irresistible, so you move through life differently. Not faster, truer. You don't chase timelines, you collapse them. With every embodied breath, with every refusal to return to the old story, with every moment you say, this time, I stay with me. That's the shift. That's the awakening. That's the end of the loop. You are no longer looping through your past. You are leading from your essence. No longer chasing safety, you are safety. No longer rehearsing pain, you are presence. And in that presence, you become the magnet, the anchor, the field, the home. Reality isn't looping anymore. It's listening, and it hears you now. Not your words, your frequency. Not your fear, your embodiment. And what it hears, it mirrors. So go gently. Go powerfully. Go as the you who remembers the truth that was always there. You were never here to repeat. You were here to rewire, to radiate, to receive. And you don't manifest what you want. You manifest what you are.